myself and Misho and my other partner, Norman, we'd look at each project, see how viable it was, look at the information memorandums, see if they were up to scratch, and also go through their data room extensively to make sure that any financier that we were marrying up the project with was not essentially getting crap. So we were stopping kind of projects that we knew weren't going to go anywhere and filtering them out, getting the good projects, and essentially marrying them up with financiers that we would be in touch with the whole time. So we're like a broker service, and as I said, we make sure that good quality stuff is essentially going out to the financiers.
Good morning, gentlemen. Apologies for being a bit late, some IT issue.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, Misha, I was just going through the stuff there with Frederick and Christian.
Okay.
And I was just explaining really what essentially we do with our projects. They come to us, we'll go through the IMs, we'll go through the data room, make sure they're top quality, and then marry them up with the financiers that we have globally. I was just explaining that we've 10 partners that are working with us. We've 3 guys in the US, 1 in Canada, Misho's in Ireland. We've 2 guys in the UK, 1 in Sweden, I'm in Latvia, and then we've a guy in Asia. So we kind of have a good kind of global base of projects that come to us of high quality, where the areas we're kind of dealing with would essentially be in green energy. So we have solar project, biomass, waste to energy. We deal with artificial intelligence, data mining. We also look at litigation finance. We do mergers and acquisitions. We've 3 clients at the minute that have patented stuff there that are looking for funding in lithium, graphene, water desalination. So we literally do everything. We have traditional mining, which is gold, coal, oil. So we practically, every sector, we look at it, as I said, once it's viable and stands on its own 2 feet, we marry it up with the financiers, and that's the way we operate. I came across Christian actually on LinkedIn, and in fairness, I liked how quick he was and responsive he was to emails and messages, etc. And we just had a brief chat. He sent an email to your good self, Frederick, which again, you came back very quickly. We had a look at your email, and that's the reason I wanted to set up the Zoom call, was essentially just find out exactly what way it does operate. From my reading of it, it's essentially that our clients would have to put up money up front, and that kind of creates an instrument then that provides them with you going to a bank or your office there and essentially doing up a funding round for them.
Yep. Well, one can describe it as that. Okay, both of you guys, have got accounting, financial backgrounds, chartered accountancy, and that sort of thing, right?
Misho has full background in kind of finance. I don't. I'm self-taught. As I said, my actual background was in waste management and environmental, and that's kind of led us to a lot of kind of projects that are coming into us would be from that area. So,
okay, I'm going to be a bit blunt now.
Yeah.
Okay. Misho, I want you to, and Christo, to forget everything that you've ever learned about accounting and finance. And the reason for that is what you've been taught, the curriculum or the curriculi that you've been following, the very basis of the teaching institutions is to create debt. And you understand debt very well, okay? You bring in financiers and there's debt everywhere. I want you to forget all about that completely. Just take it out of your mind for the next couple of minutes, okay? Think in terms of profit. The other side of a PL or a balance sheet, profit, okay? Now, what we do was never taught to you at any university or teaching education system, and there's a reason for it. It's political. But if you go back to 1946, to the agreements that were done between the initial five nations, and about rebuilding Europe after the war, and then eventually Japan. Part of those agreements was in fact the formalizing of what we do. And no one's ever asked, how did the United States raise the funds for the Marshall Plan? No one's actually asked, what are the source of funds? Okay. Well, what we do is exactly that. But it's creating profit. Let me give you a simple, little silly example. There's a lady in Galway who has a little shop, and she buys a loaf of bread for 8p, and she sells it for 10p. So there's simple arithmetic says she makes 2p profit. Now let's put that onto a round table in front of the three parties that would be involved: herself, the bread supplier, and her bread buyer. And on top of the table is these rotating, what's it called, a lazy boy or lazy Ann or something like that, lazy Susie. So she puts her $8 onto the lazy Susie in front of her. The bread supplier puts his loaf of bread in front of him on the lazy Susie, and the bread buyer puts his 10p onto the lazy Susie in front of him. And when it's all on there, the lazy Susie is rotated clockwise if the supplier is sitting on the lady's left hand side. So in front of each one is now the supplier. In front of him is the 8p, in front of the buyer is the bread, and in front of the lady is the 8p. And when it's all there, green light goes on and each one takes what's in front of him, and everyone is satisfied. The lady has sold a bread she paid for 8p for 10p, so she's got 2p profit. The buyer's got his loaf of bread, the seller has disposed of his stock, he's happy and he's been paid 8p. Now no one moves off that table until all three parties' articles are on the table and it's been rotated by the lazy Susie or whatever you want to call it. That's called a contemporaneous transaction. It is riskless and is defined as such in the SEC Act of the United States of America 1934 in Regulation 144. So what we do is we buy and we sell senior bank paper, typically medium-term notes. Most of them are 10-year paper. Or right now, the Americans are very excited about bank guarantees all of a sudden. And there's a difference between what we pay for an instrument and what we sell for it. And we won't go into a contract, obviously, if there's no profit margin. Now, let me digress a little bit. The stock exchange world, and take your pick, London Stock Exchange, has a certain volume per day, and so many billions of pounds. The bond market in London is roughly 7 times that of the stock exchange volume transaction market. The market we move in is 7 times bigger than the bond market. So in round terms, we operate in a market that's 50 times bigger than a stock exchange market. And that you can apply that globally. Nobody talks about it, and you go into the news system, BBC, they'll tell you the latest stock exchange indices across all the stock exchanges, London, New York, whatever. The reason why, my interpretation, the reason why they never talk about the bond market, because the common guy can't understand the volumes. It's just too big. And certainly, they will not talk about the market we're in, because that's even bigger. But on top of that, our market is private. All the transactions are private, and nobody advertises what happens there. Difficult to actually get stats on it. That'll be made public. The IMF and World Bank have those stats, obviously, in the European Central Bank. The typical sale contracts we enter into are in the €500 billion range and upwards. Okay, I've got one year on my table now for $2.25 trillion. And obviously the margins between the buy and the sell are small, but we do many tranches per day, many tranches per week, and it all adds up. The rationale that we're allowed, that allows us to do this by the authorities, is, first of all, we can't use our own money, not allowed to. We've got to have a client who steps up to the plate with the funding bank instrument or cash. And there has to be a project that has to be approved by the financial authorities, that this will add, simple terms, GDP, employment, improve lives of the immediate community or the district or the country. Okay, I'm busy one now where we'll engage with a country to assist them with their post-COVID nonsense. What else did I say in the email? Okay, we because it is done, we're using a client's funds to initiate and do the transactions. We show that's the proof of funds in order to enter into the buy-sell programs. The contracts are minimum a year and a day, and let's go back to your university training or educational training. You know why that is. Okay, it's political. It's got nothing to do with finance. Okay, so we don't have to prove it, enter into any of those transactions onto our balance sheets. We do not advertise or do not disclose past clients. I can talk about some of them that are more than 15 years ago, but you will not be able to prove them, because they in turn will not answer questions from someone phoning up and saying, how was your oil refinery funded? They will just tell you to go away. The company in Switzerland, again, low key, except for the one director who is a very high profile individual in Switzerland, was finance minister for Bern, and sits on various national committees and advises both the federal system there, and as well is now a consultant for the European Union and has an office in Brussels. He's obviously available for due diligence, background check and that sort of stuff. My background, originally mining engineer, worked for small companies called Anglo American and De Beers. Rose up fairly quickly into the corporate world, to director level and general manager. Today you would call it chief operating officer, CEO level. Handled some projects in today's money terms well in excess of $10 billion. So lots of those. We built some mines, we built, you name it. The Anglo American group on a global basis is involved in every single aspect of human endeavor that you can imagine. Everything except drugs, human trafficking and direct arms business, which is illegal. Been involved in all of those types of projects. I left them and then started, because I was coming across projects that would print money, but we couldn't get funders. We just couldn't get, the banks wouldn't bite. Investors were hesitant. I mean, a nice one, give you an actual example, the payback was 19 days, 19, on about $120 million. 19 days payback, couldn't get a funder. I then joined up with a group and a private bank in the US, and we did some, I learned all about securitization, and we did some large projects in Chile, in South America, about $1.2 billion funds raised. And in that process, I came across this private placement trading system. Ended up the platform that I then joined and worked for as an American-based company, and I got to the attention of Alan Greenspan and Frank Smith, who was then the CEO of the Fed, and I ended up doing the legal contracts with clients that they were helping to fund. And let me just roll back. People don't know this, but the banker on this planet is called the Federal Bank of New York, and its 6 associate banks. They produce the United States dollar, which is sold commercially by the traders on the floor. There's only, on average, about 12 of them allowed. You've got to die. One's got to die before the next one is allowed in. Those are termed they're the ultimate tier 1 traders, and they then sell the currency, and there's a discount. I mean, the moment that money hits the floor, the $100 bill, you sell it for 99 point whatever, okay, and they then on-sell it to countries. Most of our clients were obviously countries, but also very large corporations and banks would then buy, and they in turn would sell on and on and on and on. So you have a cascading system. I did those contracts largely for countries and private clients for about 8 years, learning the system, learning how it works, who actually controls planet Earth's money, and all the ugly things that you've probably read on the conspiracy theorist websites are probably true. The White House is rented out, and I have first-hand proof of that. I experienced it actually with George Bush Jr. I don't think what's his name? Trump actually realized it's rented out to the government. So he started eating some brick walls. But anyway.
He kind of put the cat amongst the pigeons, as a man would say.
Absolutely. I mean, he didn't realize what the global political scene actually is. Okay. And it's got very little to do about direct business. All right. The then owner of the company I was working for, he died, and the whole company disbanded in a way which wasn't satisfactory. But anyway, I then ran my own system for a while, but it was before electronic signatures were fully accepted. You had to travel like hell. I mean, my 2001 airline bill was just over $2.1 million. You had to travel everywhere to go and get signatures and discuss and things like that. Today, we don't need to do any of that. Electronic signatures are acceptable. We record, like this conversation with you is recorded and gets transmitted to my associates in Switzerland. Everything is now beautifully electronic, recorded, verifiable, and it changed the way in which we could do the business. I had then already tied up or met the Swiss guys, and I liked their transparency, the simpleness with which they tackled projects and applications. The CEO is an Austrian, and one gets the old message, the Swiss make clocks and chocolates.
Watches.
Well, I tell you what, this Austrian, he perfected the clock-making business, in that he's a perfectionist par excellence. But I like it. No mistakes, no errors. Those are the rules. That's what we do, and there's no negotiating or bending, anything like that. And here I refer largely to the rules that we have to abide by. Our banks that we work with, all the top banks in Europe, they're also under the same set of rules. So there's that's the way you do it, and that's it. There's nothing. You can't change anything. Okay. The documentation, the SWIFT messages, the undertakings, everything like that is exact. I just like it, and it with the whole electronic world, it made it possible that I could stay here in South Africa, sunny South Africa. I love when I talk to them, we use Skype. When I talk to them, I show them that I'm sitting here in a t-shirt and shorts in sunny South Africa, and they're sitting in the snow, and that's fine. I mean, I worked in Zurich for 3 months at a time because of the visa story, learning the SWIFT system, the treasury system, and how all of that works, how the big banks do it. This particular process, let me give you an actual example.
That's what I was going to ask you, yeah. And what I was going to say to you very directly, because look, as I said, my background is not finance, and I didn't go to college. My background was college of life, as a man would say. So I learned my trade up from, and effectively it's been sales all my life. So that's how I've become where I am at the minute. But let's say, just as an example, and I know you're going to go through that with us, the process. So if we've a client, and we'll keep it as simple as possible, that has a project, let's say it's solar power, and he needs 100 million US dollars to inject into this project. What do we need to come to you with in order to try and raise that finance?
As I said in my email, the minimum. Look, I'm busy with one with Christian now, where the client is attempting to acquire a bank instrument. Okay.
Right.
You've got, in principle, the project promoter has got to present a suitable bank instrument, acceptable and suitable bank instrument. Okay. That we then present to our credit line banks that gives us the credit line. That is then used to buy and sell and generate the required profits. Now, it can be that promoter has a friend or an associate or even an unknown third party who gets introduced into the system to present that bank instrument. Now, how does that financier profit from this whole game? What's the current interest rate that a guy gets on 50, 60 million euros sitting in a bank in London?
Like on.
Sorry, what's the interest rate he'll get?
0.00 something, that's as far as I know. It's absolutely nothing. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, but it's round about, if you're lucky, it's about 1%, but after the costs, yeah, you're close to not getting anything. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to pay him about 12%. I've had approval as high as 14 for an Italian client year before last. And then I was given the hint by the IMF to not be so disruptive. And I'll pay that in the last 12 months of the first year contract in monthly installments. So the funder makes good money, okay? And his instrument can only be, in terms of the verbiage on the SWIFT, can only be touched on maturity, but we return it 10 days before maturity. Okay, so he's safe and he makes his money, far better than he would if it's sitting in a bank somewhere. Or it could be the promoter himself who puts up the instrument. He gets his funding, which is non-recourse. Okay, to the non-CA guy, that means there's no debt. Okay, we don't work in debt. And he gets his instrument back after the year. Okay? So there are people, and Christian is now working with a client in the Middle East, where he's looking to acquire the use of an instrument, and you have different terms for it. You can lease it or whatever you want to call it, and that then puts up the required instrument in order to initiate the funding for the whole project. The larger the project is, the more efficient matters are on our side, because there's a fair amount of fixed costs involved. Give you an example. This one that Christian is busy with is a $5 billion project over 5 years, $1 billion a year, and I need an instrument of 250 mil to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because we actually came across, and I'll just give you an example, and this is kind of, Misha can come in as well. It's something that we've come across just once before, where a particular financier we were dealing with, we approached him for a waste-to-energy plant that was taking part down in South America for 225 million. And he came back to us with a person that was willing to put up 67.5 million, and that the guys could use that 67.5 million as collateral to go to the banks to raise the 225 million. So this to me seems something similar. Am I on the right tracks? No.
Not even remotely. Remember.
Right. I'm sorry for my ignorance. I'm just trying to, you see, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand exactly what it is so that I can actually sell it to our clients.
If you look at this, the one you just mentioned, if the 60 odd million was put into the Swiss company,
yeah,
they would then generate the funds for the project, okay? And the funds are not repayable; they're non-recourse. There's no debt, okay?
Right.
And at the end of the contract, the 67 million cash is returned. If he converted that into a bank instrument, the best we'll get in London is 80% from HSBC London, the LTV. So you've got to consider that as well. It's possible. If you look at that example, it's possible. The instruments have got to be cash backed in order for us to get a credit line with our credit line banks. Or if it's cash, then of course it changes because you remove the issue of the LTV.
Okay. Firstly, Frick, Having listened to your background and, if you like, your historical experience, I feel quite nervous talking because it's very, very impressive. So, and I was trying to listen very intently to what you were saying. You have a very powerful CV behind you, so I just want to say that. Um, Secondly, I think what would be best, really, if it's possible, is to maybe get a case study example from you guys. I don't know if you have one that you already have in place of how this process works. I think I understand it, but me thinking I understanding it and me actually understanding it are two different issues here. And we need to be precise with what we might bring to our clients. We can't have anywhere where we could be slightly wrong. But your whole example about the bread and stuff, it makes a lot of sense to me. In one way, it's similar to like no money changes place until everything is in place, and then the money and the goods are dispersed nearly simultaneously, and everybody knows exactly what they have to do. I don't know if that sounds right, but what Christo is asking for, and that would help us, even though my background, and Christo's right, is in finance, and I've been in that financial services industry for the last 25 years. I have not, and I'm going to be very straight with you, I have not dealt with raising finance in this type of way before. And this would be a first for me. So if it was possible, I really understand, I think, to a large degree of what you're saying, but I just want to, make sure that I fully do. So I'm thinking from my side, maybe a case study example. I don't know if you think that's irrelevant and you want me to just ask you questions now, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the case study would be heavily redacted, obviously. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. It's
Of course, yeah. We don't need names on them.
Absolutely. We don't need it. It's just to give us an idea.
Yeah. Look,
of
I'll let me just quickly just look here what I've just sent.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. What I was thinking, Misho, is like we have stuff that's coming down our pipeline. And like if you think about the Ethiopian, or sorry, not the Egypt project that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's
they're looking
significant.
at they're looking at 20 waste energy plants. It's about 4.5 billion worth of plants.
I mean, we do have, Frick, and Chris, we do have projects that are substantial, and we got on really well with the stakeholders that are the decision makers in these projects. And it's not just stuff that is just, sitting on a piece of paper. It's stuff that has developed and evolved, with contracts with the government and the president of the country and stuff like that. All of that is in place. The amount for the pipeline of the projects, as Christo has mentioned, the one in Egypt is 4.5 billion. Now, to us, I know you were talking about, trillion. To us, that's a really large project. Again, just being very transparent, that's the way we work. We also have another project with a different company that is in the same type of sector, where the pipeline on that is 2.1 billion. So if we had some sort of an idea of, as I said, a case, so we could go off and maybe educate ourselves a little bit more on exactly, because we don't want to be coming back to you and coming back with stuff that's slightly incomplete or doesn't fit correctly in where you want it to fit, because that would just annoy you and waste your time, and we'd be wasting our time as well. So I suppose we're asking for, a redacted case study of how it would work. That would help. Also how, you generate your profits and remuneration from it, where we would sit into that, how we would generate our profits and remuneration, if that was possible.
Absolutely. Okay. Let me just, having done for many years as a professional engineer, bankable feasibility studies for various projects. Obviously started off in mining, and it then went into, because the basic principles of any business is the same. Okay.
Yeah.
So it went to new banks, to food industries, to agriculture, to shipping, logistics, you name it. This process of ours I actually don't care if the bankable feasibility study is not done yet. I understand that. There are many, many projects, and I'll give you a classical example, believe it or not. When I was working for Anglo American, I was offered a document via IBM's CEO whether I wanted to get involved with this group of long-haired hippies who, on the west coast of the United States in California, were busy with some software, and they needed I was spending in a day what they wanted in funding. And I took my time and, looked at it and passed it up the line. Well, that was Microsoft Corporation. Okay, standing in front of the photograph were there were these groups of, I think, six guys. It was little Bill Gates and all these other guys. And their project plan, they couldn't raise the money from a single bank or a financial institution. I saw the glimmer that was there because we were busy with IBM doing something similar. But what I'm getting at is that if the project plan isn't complete, isn't proven to be to the nth detail that a normal bank would need, quite frankly, I don't care. Why? Because it's a riskless transaction. If at some point in time the promoter says this and this thing isn't going to work, we say fine, and we just stop, close up shop. Everyone gets their instrument back, but in that process, in the meantime, everyone's got money. No one walks away hurt or damaged or out of pocket. So we also understand that a lot of projects need money in order to do the detailed bankable feasibility study reports with all the inputs from professionals. That costs money. Okay? And they don't have the money, but he's got this brilliant idea that's going to change the world in his neck of the woods. So my approach is give him the chance, give him the opportunity. Let's go for it. And if you take any of your financial modeling that you have on any client and remove the debt equation, you know what happens to the IRR? It goes
up.
through the roof.
Yeah.
Okay. I have not come across a project that does not make money, lots of money, if you provide the capital on a non-recourse basis. So it doesn't have to have bells and whistles and aisles. We start off, yes, as the process goes along with us, we understand that as the guy gets funds, the promoter, he then fleshes out his project and he starts with the engineers and the architects or whatever the project's about, and he details to the necessary levels for him to be able to execute and manage. And he feeds us that all the time, because I've got to feed it again to the Fed, because we will institute an auditing function that has to report to all the authorities that every dollar or euro that was paid went to the project. So it doesn't go into corruption and stuff that shouldn't be there.
Absolutely.
So the detail, and you talk about data rooms, I won't even look at it. That's the project promoter's responsibility. If his executive summary, 2-3 pages, cash flow, Christo's just done one for that guy by quarter, that's fine. Gives us an idea what I've got to do. In reality, this particular project would actually need a far larger instrument in order to generate the $1 billion per year. But we have a mechanism available where, and there are 99.9% of all projects, the first couple of months, quarters even, need less cash in order to do what they have to do. then I use those periods in order to plow back some of the profits back into the trading basket and increase the amount of the trading basket and hence the volume that I can then execute every day. So, for example, I mean, in normal terms, this project needing $1 billion a year wouldn't need a 250 million instrument. It'll need closer to about a 600 million. But I'm also recognizing that the client doesn't have 600 million. He's not going to get it. So I just engineer the thing on a basis of doing the possible. I don't look for doing the impossible. We look for reasons to do the job, to do to execute the project.
Okay.
So,
well, Frick, what I can say to you there, I'm delighted to hear that to a certain extent, because without going into detail at the moment, because there's no point, even though, as Christo has mentioned, we have a 4.5 billion pipeline and we have another one for 2.1, the most exciting project that we have both seen potentially requires a lot less money. Okay? It requires limited amount of money. But the reason I'm saying it's the most exciting project is because on 3 or 4 different levels on a global scale, if they achieve what they want to achieve, the impact this will have on the world as we know it is significant. And I'm not saying that lightly. Okay? Headline type of industry, it's in the water treatment space. It's mobile. It's revolutionary in the way it works, that there's no chemical byproducts, and the actual byproduct it produces is hydrogen, which in turn uses the machinery uses to power itself, and the excess hydrogen can be piped back into the grid line, all that kind of stuff. It's based, Christo mentioned very briefly, it's based on 2 patents that have been approved. They've gone through all the independent testing in the US and have passed all the FDA and the scientific approvals needed. And it's now, if you like, manifesting itself to the point where they are looking for finance. And we can talk about that later on. What I would like is, I need to educate myself a little bit more. And what I'm going to suggest, if we do get maybe a case study example from you guys that we can both study, and then maybe reschedule another meeting that we can go through it and then see if there's any potential of working together. I don't know if that sounds reasonable to you.
Can do. Can I just mention something?
Sure.
In the 10 years that I did feasibility studies and designs for clients, and then looking for funding for them before coming across the system, I think I'm safe to say that every single project I looked at, my advice was to the client was to increase his project by at least 2-fold. Project promoters, with their brilliant idea, okay, then think of the funding, and then he thinks of his local banker and the other bankers, and he then says, I'm not going to get this amount of money that I actually want. Deep down, he knows how much more efficient this project or plant or whatever it's going to be is going to be if it's right sized. So he reduces the amount that he tells other people, hoping that it'll be small enough to get the funding, and then he'll grow from there. This system of ours, I don't care how big or small it is, okay, but and I wouldn't get involved directly now in terms of the size and scope of it, okay. That's not my job. I'm just saying to you as an aside that I've almost across the board, I mean, an oil refinery in in the Middle East, okay, in Bahrain, in southern Jordan, Vietnam's first oil refinery, phase 2 of the upgrading of the Panama Canal, houses in northern Mexico, you name it. We ended up saying to them, why are you going so small? Wouldn't there be a bigger benefit to your clients, to, and in this case that you're talking about, this water purification system, to the world, if you hit it and hit it fast? And the answer was yes. So I said, well, let's do it. What's stopping you?
Yeah, I fully get that, and you are right in what you're saying. And as a matter of fact, we've come across that as well, where, you know, promoters are reluctant to put something that they feel, as you say, your pillar type finance banks would sort of go take a step back, so they retract and reduce things. And actually, I'm delighted again to hear you say that, because in my opinion, the financial success of this water project I'm talking to you about is really going to be based on speed. So money is going to be needed significantly to get everything in line, organize everything, and then once you hit the ground, you're hitting it running. So that your competitors, the barrier to any potential competitors coming in, becomes significant straight away. So Mika, I take that on board.
Mika, there's I know of a patent that a British company called Wilkinson bought when I was a young boy, which would allow the manufacturing of a razor blade, that was their business, and the father would buy this razor blade when the boy would start shaving, and he would be buried with that razor. Wilkinson purchased that patent from the patent holder. We have never ever seen that razor. I can give you lots of other examples. Okay?
Yeah.
They purchase them and they bury them. So if a guy comes up with something that you describing it as revolutionary, I'm telling you now, they'll take him out. They'll purchase him.
Well, that's why, Frick, we have a limited window here, because a contract has been signed, and the reason it has is because the two guys that have these patents in place, there's a significant humanitarian side to it on a global scale. I mean, you can imagine these units that cost, like, there's different revenue streams, but one of them is these units that cost very limited money, that self-power and provide excellent quality drinking water, and the byproduct is electricity. You can imagine these units in remote parts of the world, in villages and stuff. So I'm just,
yeah,
so the guys that
I hear you, but I tell you what.
But that's why there's a limited window here.
The global politicians are going to get involved.
Well, let's hope that, you know, this is something that we can do, and before anybody is aware of it, that we're actually manufacturing these units.
What you've got to talk to, and from what I've seen from you guys, that you also have, so you've got projects needing funding.
Yes.
But you've potentially got investors who are looking for a better return on their money. Am I right?
Yes.
Investors are always looking for a better return on the money.
Well, then if he wasn't, he's not an investor, okay? What we do is we put those together, not directly, okay? So we're looking for large amounts, you know, someone who's got a large amount that he can issue an instrument from a top bank in London or the EU. And you're looking at about 70, 80 million minimum. The larger it is, the more efficient it is, the quicker and better. Okay. It's safe, and the guy gets a good interest, okay, on his He can view it as a pure investment. What the money gets used for, it's got nothing to do with him. Whether that project
Who
fails or not, nothing to do with him.
who underwrites that, Frick? Is that the instrument that it's underwritten through the instrument? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the instrument comes in, gets into one of our trading banks. Now let me describe to you what happens when that instrument comes in. There's a pre-advice on the pre-delivery of every instrument. Okay. After the pre-advice comes in, we now know that the client is serious. Okay. It's not a firm commitment to send the instrument, but it's telling us via his bank that they are really willing and able to do that. Okay. The instrument comes in on a Swift MT 799. You're aware of that?
I've heard of it before, yes.
Okay. We then talk to our trading banks and find out which one is prepared to provide the credit line for this project. And I've got to have the application in, I've got to have the project description and all of that, because they need the authorizations, and it goes into a completely separate system in the bank. HSBC's division, which handles this in London, HSBC headquarters is in Canary Wharf, correct?
Yeah.
This division is in the city itself. I'm sorry, I'm going to give you another example. We trade with, for example, Credit Suisse. So there's a year-end party in Zurich, and all the directors are invited, 13 of them, to this party at a very nice restaurant on the canal. And only 2 of those directors know exactly why they're having dinner with this client. So there are 3 of us. The rest of the directors thought we were commercial, very large commercial clients. Oh, we've got accounts there. Only 2 of them know that it's a private placement trading entity. So your normal banking structure do not know, and in fact are kept separate. When I went for training at Credit Suisse in Zurich, if you know the streets of Zurich, it's where we were housed with a small little building quite close to the old city where the fort is, and it's got a small little plaque, brass plaque at the front door, and it doesn't even say Credit Suisse because it's a subsidiary of Credit Suisse which is never mentioned anywhere, and half a dozen of ones sat in that little building. So what I'm saying is this: because your commercial banks, their prime objective is to create debt. We do not create debt for clients' projects. We create free, profitable funds. So we're at loggerheads with the commercial banking institutions, and they will do their utmost to badmouth us, okay, not knowing what actually happens in the bank at the background. All right. So a client's RWA comes in. We then start talking to possible credit line banks, and we reach an in principle agreement. Okay. A special bank account is opened up for the receipt of that instrument. We then tell the client, right, send the MT760, which is the standby letter of credit or the bank guarantee, and it's on a very specific verbiage that allows the bank to issue the credit line. That account is not even in our name. It is for the benefit of us. The 2 signatories have to be on it, and they have to be at least director level of that bank. The only way that instrument can ever be touched is if those 2 bank officers, directors, both sign and do so. According to the anti-money laundering legislations across the whole of Europe and the rest of the world, the instrument can only be sent back from where it came from. Now that's the ultimate description of safety for the client putting that instrument in there. Okay. And then we get the credit line, which is then used, we have to display by law the money onto the table with a lazy Susie. Okay. It takes about 6 weeks from the instrument coming in and verified to the first cash going to the client. During this period, it's getting this whole lot sorted out with the account where the credit line is. The two directors must sign simultaneously, not one after the other, simultaneously in front of the compliance officer who's involved there. And then we have to then enter into the agreements for the purchase of suitable instruments and engage with our buyers for them purchasing and getting agreement for purchasing and agreeing on the prices and everything else. And it's about a 6-week process. Then payments, the cycles then could be anything depending on the bank that we use. Is either weekly or monthly. They tend today to go more for monthly because the costs involved are less. If it's weekly, you're doing the same thing 4 times because all the changes is the number of digits on the input systems or the output systems. So they could be monthly. Mostly now we're finding out that they prefer to go monthly. It reduces the costs. And there are typically about 10 trading months in a year. 42 weeks. The rest are holidays, non-banking days, things like that. What is important for us to get the issuer and ourselves in Zurich and the buyer in the same time zone. Yes, we are doing a lot of business now in Singapore and Hong Kong, but it shortens the effective day. So it gets a bit. We've got to pay extra time for the guys in Switzerland and arrange staff to then cater for the difference in people being at the office and doing things. There's no tax involved for the client in Switzerland. What we do advise him, and I'll do that on the side, is for him to examine using an appropriate tax efficient system to fund his project and to hold it and things like that. We find a lot of promoters, they're technically orientated, they think technical, and they forget about this thing called the whole tax regime going forward. So special purpose vehicles, we would advise them and house them in through foundations or trusts. Liechtenstein, Jersey, Channel Island trusts, Guernsey trusts are very good, and they close to Europe, so time zone issues are not a problem. And then the client just runs his own business, and obviously there's the auditing function that, and we'll appoint whoever's the KPMG, Ernst & Young, whatever, to then liaise with the client, tie up with them to produce the required reports that will satisfy the authorities in Switzerland and the European Central Bank's guys that the funds did go where it was supposed to go. But that's in a nutshell. Long-term projects. Obviously, the instrument is returned before maturity, and the client just reissues it immediately again, and the thing largely just continues seamlessly until the end of the project is executed. Because there's there's no risk on our side. We're making money, you know, all the time. Clients making money. You guys will get your fees. We don't. We have had very long ones. The longest one is a lady who owns a series of clinics in the US, 14 years. She just kept on expanding and building new clinics, in a medical health clinic. So we don't push the guy in terms of executing, and in execution of every single project, problems will arise. I mean, some stuff, sometimes it'll be, you know, good news stuff, events, but you have labor strikes, you have Mother Nature interfering with a storm or this or that or the next.
COVID.
Yeah, you know, so what? You know, that we just relax and get it done. If you look at on a global basis, projects are the basis of our civilization. It's how everything is created. The new stuff that's needed on this planet is created by somebody building something, and we tie into that, and on the basis of that, how we do it has no risk involved, okay, to anybody. We just sit back and relax, and of course the client wants to start making his profit as soon as possible, so he's the one pushing it. He's the one who's driving the construction crews or the executors or whatever the systems are. And if he knows that he may change at a drop of a hat the business plan, he just has to tell me. I feed it back into the trading mechanism, our kitchen, and we just adjust in terms of the changes that he needs to do something. I mean, I've had a guy many years ago, a client who wanted to expand. It's a sugar plantation, sugar refinery business, and halfway through, a neighbor said, "Why do you want to buy me out?" You know, he came to us and said, "Yeah, it sounds like a damn good idea. Buy him out." And his business doubled up in size immediately, made his plant very easy to adapt, make it more efficient. So, you know, that'll happen. But
Yeah.
there's no, it's unlike your commercial banks who, put it kindly, I don't like them. I mean, I have to use them for my local credit cards and things like that. But
That makes two of us.
you know, their viewpoint is deposit $1,000 with us and we lend you $1,000. Oh
Yeah.
man, it's no, we're not gonna play that game. And the key thing is it's riskless. It's and you know, we multiply the instrument's value that comes in, and it depends on the size of the instrument and what I can do in terms of putting profits back in again in the initial periods. But you're probably looking at about a 20% per month return on that trading basket, and it varies. It depends on the type of contract we can get at that point in time, what the margin is between the buy and the sell of the instruments. Yeah, so and it's quite frankly it's actually quite easy. There's very little paperwork from my side. I'll send you examples of the instrument, of the SWIFT verbiage that's needed, you know, that needs to come in. And then there's only two items. If it's a standby letter of credit, it has to conform to the ICC ISP 98, and if it's bank guarantee, URDG 758. And that's just the terms in the ICC rules that dictates to our bank to give us the credit line. You know, how it'll be done, under what terms and conditions, things like that. Otherwise, it's pretty vanilla stuff. So I would see you guys. You've got projects. Incidentally, I've got projects as well. Okay. So projects are not a problem. It's getting a funder who's prepared to issue an instrument based on his funds and earn himself a nice return on it. And as I say, the bigger they are, the more efficient it becomes our side, because there's obviously some fixed costs and semi-variables. But the minimum instrument, 80 million, somewhere around there, and it depends on the project. I mean, your Egyptian 4.5 billion. It depends over what time period we're talking about.
Yeah, you see, as I said, there's 20 plants involved in that, so it would be over probably, I'd say, over 10-year term, and like each plant will be done. They're not going to be all done at the one time, so it'd be kind of it would be a kind of a rolling project. So it's not going to be 4.5 billion straight away. So, like each plant, I know would typically cost about 225 million each.
Yeah. Okay. You know, we use, and I've got the one I've just been notified. The sound log is going ahead. We use the sovereign guarantees of that a nation can produce. The discount is unfortunately quite severe on those ones, but it's still doable. Okay.
Yeah, I think, look, to be honest with you, as long as the discount is within reason, most of our clients would rather have a smaller percentage of a larger amount than a large percentage of basically nothing. So, you know, we know our clients very well. That's one thing we're good at. We're very close to them. And when we, please God, if we reach that stage, we'd be able to manage their expectations and get them over the line.
Look, it's the art of the possible, Miguel.
Yes.
It's, you know, and the thing is that within some limits, I can almost do the impossible.
Okay.
So.
But that's good. That's good, Frick. You're going to be tested.
I look forward to. Look, the only, you know, the thing is that what's important is, and I'll send you a little note. It's called The Rules of the Road, and it's been around for a long time, where people used to send these out to clients. A client gets invited into the system. Okay, I don't care. Okay, there's a guy called Bill Gates.
Yes.
Who it's now 3.5 years ago, came in and said, you know, I've got these couple of 100 million, and I want to participate to do these projects in Africa and Asia. You remember malaria and
yes,
something else. And he started dictating with his financial guru next to him how this is going to happen. We told him to piss off. Simple as that. Okay. The system has got laid down rules. They are not negotiable. They're not bendable. I don't care whether your financial guru has got a doctorate in finance. In fact, I tend to go very cold if a client brings a banker or a lawyer into the discussion. Bankers do not know what we do. I'll give you a real example. Just before COVID last year, we hosted a retired VP of Citibank New York for a week in Zurich to explain to him this process. We should have recorded his comments and conversations. He'd been with the bank for 30 odd years. He'd never ever heard of this process and system, and he was like a 16-year-old with a lollipop running around thinking this is the next best thing since sliced bread. Why didn't he know about it before? The previous governor of the Central Bank of Panama was a banker in JP Morgan, New York for 7 years. I met him through the finance minister of Mexico, and his comment was the same. He knew vaguely about it, but when he asked around, they all denied that it existed or was possible or whatever. Well, we ended up funding the upgrade of the Panama Canal Phase 2 and expanded it. Okay, so bankers, they are kept out of the loop. When I started this process, every single major bank that was capable or was participating in this sort of thing, on their websites had a detailed description of exactly this. Along comes George Bush Sr., and he tells all the banks to remove it. And they started a black propaganda program that told the internet that this is actually illegal, because George Bush and the 5 families that run the United States of America wanted to do it themselves only.
Yeah.
They have a foundation called the Carlyle Foundation, and if you see any documents that's got the Carlyle Foundation, run.
Yeah. Well, I think, look, we've said it before. I mean, I can speak for myself, and I'd say Christos probably, we need to educate ourselves a little bit more, so we can present ourselves better to you and more efficiently, and our clients and their projects more efficiently and better to you. I look forward to receiving the case study redacted as it is. It would be great then if after a few days we had a follow-up meeting just to go through it, because I will have a list of questions that I'd like to ask so that I can understand it better. And then the way I see this working is on the back of that, then Christo and myself will have a good conversation to see if we have anything worthwhile. And we could then maybe organize another meeting and say, look, Frick, Chris, we think these are worthwhile. These are the general frameworks. Give us your opinion and we can take it from there.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I'll look at what I can bang across to you guys to give some mass and reality on what can be done. Projects are easy. There are lots of them. What's the difficult task is going to be to get an investor. It tends to be highly unlikely that the promoter of the project has got the funds necessary to do this.
Right, John.
I've had one in 10 that has the funds. Okay.
Well, I can tell you now, Frick, most of the projects that are in front of us, and that's why they are in front of us, none of them have the money to complete the task. They have some money at the beginning for, burn money and seed money, and they've already got through those phases, but they don't have the funds to complete it, and that's why they're with us, because that's what we try and do if we can.
Yeah. So put your thinking in terms of looking to investors to do this. Okay.
Okay.
And no link whatsoever. The investor doesn't get linked to the project. The investor links to me and to the guys in Switzerland. So he doesn't have to be concerned about what's this project all about. Just hold on a bit.
Sure.
Lovely. Listen, thanks a mil for your time. You've been very good. And as Micho said, if you send that over to us, we'll have a look at it in depth and come back to you as soon as possible. And we'll try and set up another meeting.
Good stuff. So I look forward to.
Very good. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you, gentlemen. If nothing
Thanks,
else,
Chris.
I've learned a lot. Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys.